Welcome in, everyone. Another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Another week is here. Maction has begun. And if you like Maction, Adam Burke and I will break that down for you every Tuesday episode. But the big kahuna is here. I don't know why I keep calling you that.
I don't either, but when I go to Jersey Mike's, I always get the big kahuna cheesesteak subs. Maybe that's
yeah?
why. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. There, see, it all comes together. Matt Youmans, at Matt Youmans 247. I am at one Tim Murray. Both Matt and I a little raccoon-eyed this week. We're trying to figure out who's going to win some college basketball games in addition to college football games. But last week, Matt, an 8-6 week for you with your first class and coach plays.
How'd first class do compared to coach?
3-2 first class, 5-4 coach.
So no difference.
A little.
Yeah, you have to pay.
Yeah.
Don't pay the extra to go first class.
But what happened was I decided to go head-to-head with you, and I got smacked up. I took the points with A&M. You laid it with Ole Miss. 31-28 the final score. So put that on the board. 1-0 Matt in our head-to-head showdown.
We've only had one head-to-head showdown.
Only one.
In 9 weeks? Wow.
We bet very similarly, though. So I don't know if that leads to entertaining podcast listening for college football fans, that we do bet very similarly, that we agree on a lot of things. I've looked at both our cards, and there are some overlaps and no disagreements. But we got an interesting weekend ahead of us. There's no doubt about that. And let's get to it with the main course. Well, I believe this is the first time, Matt, we've ever had the number one team in the college football playoff rankings face off against the number one team in the AP poll. And that's what we're getting on Saturday in Athens, Georgia. Number 3 in the first installment of the college football playoff rankings. Tennessee, number 1. This game on CBS, 3:30 Eastern kickoff down there between the hedges. And this is a line that is sitting at 8, opened up at Circa on Sunday. And you can always hear the opening lines revealed show with Jonathan Von Tobel at 2 p.m. Eastern. Open 9, got down to 8. Has hit 7.5, but as of time record, has not get anywhere near that touchdown number. And, looking around different tweets that are out there, BetMGM, VSiN.com's bet splits with DraftKings. I texted John Murray from the Westgate Superbook just a little while ago. Heavy public action on Tennessee. 90% earlier this week at BetMGM on the Volunteers. 88% at DraftKings. John Murray told me at the Westgate Superbook on Thursday afternoon, 2.5-1 ticket count on Tennessee. I'm not saying you blindly play games to fade the public, but I'm curious your thoughts and your breakdown of this Tennessee-Georgia game.
Well, first of all, Tennessee kicked my butt last week because I took the points with Kentucky.
I did too.
And I'm very impressed by what the Vols did to the Wildcats, who were not live dogs in that game last week. So it's a Tennessee offense that's obviously going to run a fast pace. Hendon Hooker is not making many mistakes, and I think the Vols are going to be able to put points on the board. What I keep hearing is that the Georgia defense is equipped to contain the Tennessee receivers. I'm not so sure. If you go back to the Georgia-Alabama games last year, Bama's receivers were making plenty of big plays against that Georgia secondary.
That's true.
And I think the Tennessee is going to be able to do the same. But instead of breaking this game down for 10 minutes, I played
if you want.
Well, what I did early in the week was I played Tennessee plus 8.5, and I did not know. I knew it was going to be a popular dog. I didn't know it would be to this extent. And like you referenced, BetMGM tweeted out yesterday that 90% of the tickets, 94% of the money nationwide is on Tennessee. I don't like that, Tim. I don't like it. So one part of your handicapping is you got to read the betting market. Mm-hmm. And I don't want necessarily to be on a popular dog. So what I've done here is I have played a teaser and a money line parlay with Georgia on it to kind of give me some insurance and maybe a shot at a middle in case this Tennessee bet blows up. I didn't get off the bet entirely, but I did play Georgia on a couple other bets just to win straight up, essentially to give myself some sort of middle, because I don't want the full exposure on the Tennessee bet. It just doesn't feel like the right thing to do right now.
Yeah, it is. It's such a fascinating game, and I always like to point out, read the market. What is the market telling you? Right now, it feels like it's begging you to take Tennessee. But the caveat to that would be this, Matt. It was begging you to take Tennessee a couple weeks ago when they played Alabama.
I did.
And you did, and they won outright. So, there is, and I've heard people bring this up, in 2019 with LSU, the odds makers couldn't catch up to LSU, right? You kept putting too low of a number. Public came on LSU, boom, they would win again. They were just so prolific offensively.
Right.
I don't think Tennessee is that level. And the market has obviously corrected itself to how good Tennessee is. But I want to throw something by you. The Alabama-Tennessee game at Rocky Top, Alabama closed as a 9-point favorite. Now, they lost, obviously, that game. Georgia is an 8-point favorite, and they're at home. Mm-hmm. So comparing the two, and I would say that Georgia's a better football team than Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, Tennessee has obviously proven out that they are a better football team than we thought a couple weeks ago. But I think that's interesting and why I would lean Georgia in this spot, because the market, some people might think, well, the market hasn't adjusted to Tennessee. It's adjusted a whole hell of a lot.
Sure.
I mean, the look-ahead line in the summer was 12-13 on in favor of Georgia. Mm-hmm. So,
well, first thing I'll say about that Alabama line is that was a bad number. And
it clearly was.
I talked to a couple of very sharp professional bettors that week who made Alabama around a 3-point favorite in that game. But the public hammered Bama. I was over at the Westgate that day, Tim, watching the game with a guy who's, a big bet is not necessarily a sharp bet. I was over at the Westgate Superbook watching that game that day, Alabama-Tennessee. I had Tennessee, and he had Bama, and he had like $5,000 on Bama. He laid the points, and he thought Bama was going to kick their butt. To me, that's public play. That's a guy who plays a lot of favorites too. He bets big, but he plays a lot of favorites. And there are people out there who probably believe Georgia's going to kick Tennessee's butt too, and it might happen. But in that first game with Tennessee at home, catching more than a touchdown, I felt like you had to take the balls. You don't have to do it here, but in terms of the matchup and everything, I've watched Tennessee basically every game this season. I don't think they're going to be outclassed by Georgia. Hendon Hooker has 21 TD passes and 1 interception. The guy's completing 71.2% of his passes. Stetson Bennett looked a little shaky last week in the Georgia-Florida game, if you watched it. So I don't think the Vols are going to be outclassed, but there's something that just doesn't smell right with this. When the public is pounding an underdog like this, I don't want to have full exposure. I am going to say that Tennessee plus 8.5 is one of my plays, but I put Georgia out there. I actually played Georgia-Bama moneyline parlay. I think it was like $1,000 would pay off $650.
Okay.
And Bama's not going to lose to LSU, but I need LSU to go, I think, one more win to get over its season win total too. But you can match Georgia up with something else in a moneyline parlay if you're extremely confident that favorite's going to win. You don't want that second favorite to screw you over and blow your ticket. I'm not 100% confident that Clemson's going to beat Notre Dame. I like Clemson a lot, but not enough to put Clemson on that moneyline parlay with Georgia.
Yeah, we'll get to that game here in just a little bit. So to sum it up, 8.5. I don't know if there's any 8.5s out there. There might be an 8.5 still out there. 8 where we sit here at Circa, but 3:30 Eastern. Is it going to be an official play, Tennessee, for the podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to use Tennessee plus 8. I actually, when I was on with Mitch and Paul on Tuesday morning, Tennessee plus 8.5 is one of the plays I put out there. I got to stick with it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, all of a sudden I'm off this game. I am buying insurance. That's why I make it clear here. I am getting insurance on. I did not think that the Vols were going to be as popular as they are at this. When you're seeing numbers like 90-something%, that's a bad sign.
And the line isn't moving really all that much.
It's moving a half point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If it's moving through key numbers, that might be your tell. All right, let's get to Death Valley, a game you alluded to, Alabama visiting LSU. Both of these teams coming off of a bye, so no rest advantage, and something that you and I both look for. And a couple of my bets this week are teams that have massive rest advantage playing teams with 5-6 consecutive games, and they're coming off a bye. They're getting healthier. So you look at Alabama at LSU. It'll be a night game, so the benefit there. Jimmy Ott will be all fired up down there. Baton Rouge probably won't have a shirt on. Number 6 Alabama in the first college football playoff rankings at number 10 LSU. Certainly not a vintage Alabama team. But I want to point something out here that our good friend Chris Felica, he always puts out his nuggets on each game. And on this game, in the last 5 meetings at LSU, Alabama has allowed a total of 47 points with 2 shutouts, 17, 0, 0, 13, and 17. So there you go. And he also pointed out that Brian Kelly went at Notre Dame as a double-digit underdog. He was that 8 times, and Notre Dame won 1 of those games, and that was against Oklahoma in 2012. So the number at 13.5, Matt, in favor of the Crimson Tide on the road at Death Valley.
I think the number's a little bit high here. Obviously, the Alabama defense is not what we propped it up to be in the preseason, Tim. And that was, I think, pretty clear when Tennessee lit up the Tide for about 575 yards and 52 points. The thing about Jaden Daniels, and I was talking with somebody about this game yesterday, and he said, I don't trust Jaden Daniels. I said, well, I mean, have you watched the last couple games?
He's been fantastic.
Yeah, he's been incredible. He's been off the charts. I didn't trust him either until he went to Gainesville and put 6 touchdowns on the Florida defense. And then look what he did against Ole Miss. You also have to consider this. Brian Kelly is an excellent quarterback coach, and it just takes some time for things to click. And I think Jaden Daniels finally found his groove, found his rhythm, and in the Brian Kelly offense. And I think the LSU offense has found its identity. So I would be surprised if the Bama defense shuts down LSU in this game. I think Brian Kelly, Jaden Daniels are going to put some points on the board. Tim, I'm going to split this play. A half unit on the over. Mm-hmm. This is what I did. I played LSU plus. I actually haven't bet plus the points yet because I wanted to see if I could get 14.
14, yeah.
I mean, you're never going to run to the window or jump on the app saying, I got to get 13.5 because you might be able to get 14 by game day. So I'm trying to get 14 on LSU. I'm hoping to. And I put another half unit over the total of 58. When LSU went to Florida, that was a 45-35 game, 80 points on the board. I could definitely see 70 on the board in this one.
Let me ask a philosophical question here when it comes to betting in college, because of the volatility. Very rarely would I ever recommend playing a teaser. But what about buying? What about buying points? Because you look at LSU at 13.5. There's one spot in town. I think you could buy that for 10 cents.
Yeah.
And I would say on a regular basis, buying points isn't really a profitable endeavor, but how often would you say to get it up to from a 6.5 to a 7, 9.5 to a 10, 13.5 to a 14, will you look at that?
That's a great question. I think it's a kind of a personal decision. I'm not going to criticize anybody who wants to buy from 6.5 to 7. I'll buy from 3.5 to 3.
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave that hook laying out there and be exposed on 3.5. Or I'll just play the money line on a 3.5 point favorite, instead of buying the hook. If you want to buy from 6.5 to 7, or from 7.5 to 7, or from 13.5 to 4, I'm not going to blame anybody for that. Though you get a lot of guys, critics, Twitter clowns who sit there and take shots at people who mention that on Twitter, but a lot of those guys aren't betting either. Okay, they're just the experts who want to tell you how it's done, but they're not actually out there betting either. So do what you want to do, whatever makes you happy. First of all, you're paying also for peace of mind, okay, which means something. Because in a game like this, you say, don't you feel much better when it kicks off if you have 14 than if you have 13.5? Or if you're laying 3 instead of 3.5. If I'm laying 3.5 in a game, which I never do, but I did when I was younger and dumber, you're on edge the entire game because you're exposed on that 3.5 and you're afraid you're going to get burnt by it. And how many times have you been burned by it? Quite a few, probably, right?
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to a game that is currently 3.5.
By the way, 10 cents I think is fair. You don't want to get to the point where you're paying 20 cents, for half points.
Yeah, and I mean that's the biggest thing too. When you're playing teasers, especially in the NFL, There are shops in town that have minus 120. Go to that shop and play at minus 120. Don't play minus 130, 40, whatever it may be. Speaking of 3.5, we go to South Bend, Indiana. Clemson at Notre Dame, 7:30 Eastern kickoff on NBC. A total of 44, depending on where you look. It's 43.5 here at Circa, 44.5 at Caesars, consensus 44. Spread pretty much painted 3.5. There is a couple fours out there. This is a fascinating game to me because under normal circumstances, if this was not a team that I've followed and knew as well as Notre Dame, I'd love the dog here. Home dog, popular side seems to be the number 4 ranked team in the country in Clemson. And I do think Clemson has its vulnerabilities. The issue I have here is that Notre Dame has a vulnerable spot, and that would be the quarterback. Drew Pine, I'm sure he's a great young man. Maybe not so much at playing the quarterback position. And I would say this. His first start against Cal was not very good, but then he went to North Carolina and played really well. Came to Vegas, played really well. Since then, Matt, it has been ugly, whether it be the Stanford game, which is just, makes you want to vomit. Even Syracuse, the game that they won, I thought he was missing a lot of throws. He hit a couple, a big one down the seam. I thought he played really poorly against UNLV. So looking at this game, and I'm curious to get your thoughts, I actually played under 44.5, which is available. Couple reasons. I think Notre Dame is going to want to have a similar game plan to what they had against Ohio State, which was let's play it as slow as possible. I think Clemson's offense isn't anywhere near Ohio State.
Right.
I think it's a little, as I think Stanford Steve said this on our show, pretty vanilla offensively, Clemson is. And I think Notre Dame's going to just be stubborn and try to figure out ways to run the ball on Clemson, which showed some vulnerable aspects against Florida State, giving up over 200 yards. But at the end of the day, I have a hard time looking at a path to a Notre Dame victory outside of turnovers, which Notre Dame does a very poor job of doing. They got a pick 6 on the first play last week. Look, I love the matchup last week, both you and I, against Syracuse. They did exactly what we thought. They'd run it right down their throats, and they did. And they got a couple turnovers, which were key. I don't see the path here. So I'm curious your thoughts, Clemson at Notre Dame.
You hit on a key thing. Last week, the Fighting Irish were playing with the lead the whole time because they got a pick 6 to open the game. And it's kind of a snowball effect, and I was very happy with that because you and I were on the Irish, and that was perfect. They were able to run the ball the entire day on that Syracuse defense. 56 carries for 246 rushing yards. And you're not going to be able to run the ball like that against the Clemson defense.
No.
So this is going to be a much different type of game. Drew Pine is not going to be able to go 9 for 19 for 116 yards with a pick, and the Irish win this game against Clemson. And on the other side, DJ Uiagalelei, is that right?
That's pretty close.
Okay, how do you pronounce it?
DJ Uiagalelei.
Okay, Uiagalelei.
I might be wrong too.
Okay, DJ has played much better.
DJU.
He's played much better. I think this is the type of game, if he's struggling, that Dabo will make the quarterback switch and go to Cole Klubnik, and he won't be afraid to play the freshman, and I'm okay with that too. So I think what you have with Clemson, you got a couple quarterback options. With Notre Dame, you got one bad one.
Yeah.
And the Irish are not going to be able to run the ball over the Clemson defense. To me, that's the key, Tim. So I don't feel comfortable laying really more than 3 with Clemson here. I know Brad Powers got the best number. He tweeted that out. And smart move by him to lay 3 with Clemson. I'm going to play Clemson here. I think I'm going to have you put me down for money line or something like that because you're right. You and Stanford Steve said it right. It's a vanilla Clemson offense. I don't feel comfortable laying the points. The Tigers were lucky to beat Syracuse the previous week. Offense was really struggling in that game. I think this is a type of game where Clemson's just going to have a little bit more offense and the better defense and finds a way to win a close game. But I don't think the way Clemson does it is really going to impress a lot of people. But the thing is, I'm not afraid to bet against Notre Dame. And by the way, the last time these teams played in South Bend, I was on the Irish and getting the points. You remember that game well. DJ
double overtime victory.
Wild game. That was an instant classic.
Oh my gosh.
How great that game was. This Notre Dame team, nowhere near as good as that one. And that Clemson team was a lot better too. So Notre Dame has lost home games. Sorry, Tim.
It's all right.
To Marshall.
Yep.
To Stanford.
Yep.
And was lucky to escape against Cal.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't see Clemson going here to lose this game, but it could happen.
Notre Dame 0-4 ATS at home this year. However, they're 3-0 ATS when either an underdog or a favorite of less than a touchdown. Actually, 4-0 ATS in that particular instance. So,
Doesn't it seem like there's a lot of people out there who would like to see Clemson lose?
Yes.
To get knocked out of the playoff picture. I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but I want to see Clemson show up with an impressive performance this week. I haven't really seen that from the Tigers yet. Have you? Have you watched a Clemson game yet where you're blown away and said, okay, there it is. That's what I was waiting to see.
And I thought we were going to get it 2 weeks ago against Syracuse. Their defensive line coach called out their D line, which is their best part. They got 2 top 10, NFL prospects on that D line, and it really hasn't been. It's not. What was it? 2018. The Clemson defensive line was just an absolute monster, and they won a national championship. It's just not that. Maybe DJU will get good visions of his performance from 2020. Maybe his best game of his career. I mean, he was spectacular.
I don't think there's any maybes about it. That was his best game, right?
In that game, as you said, was an instant classic, double overtime. Notre Dame won that game, and I have a hard time envisioning that again. I will say the reason I played the under, I think Notre Dame will struggle mightily to get much going offensively. Obviously, when you play a low total under 44.5, Matt, it's a situation where a couple turnovers and you're screwed, right?
Yeah.
Especially late in the game, you go for it on 4th down, whatever it may be. But the weather's supposed to be a little iffy. It's going to be windy, wind gusts of around 30 miles per hour, which, as you know, Matt, that's what affects totals. And we've seen the total really come down in a lot of shops. So
I've been in South Bend for a lot of those games where it's windy and cold. And if you got those conditions Saturday, I think you have a good chance for a low-scoring game. Tim, I kind of feel like Notre Dame right now is a 5-3 team that's going to finish 7-5, and you and your family are going to be in Shreveport for a bowl game in late December.
Wow. We're hoping. Holiday Bowl. Holiday Bowl.
Holiday Bowl be great.
Speak it into existence, people. Holiday Bowl for the Irish. 7-5 Holiday Bowl.
I've already made my flight reservations, by the way, for the Holiday Bowl. I think December 28th.
December 28th, Petco Park.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great? Notre Dame, Washington? Huh?
That'd be good.
Let's make it happen. All right, one more game for the main course, a top 25 showdown. Texas coming off a bye, Matt, facing Kansas State, who absolutely pummeled Oklahoma State last week, 48-0. And now the Purple Cats at home are a dog. Riddle me that, Batman.
Yeah, that's a tough one here because do you want to play Kansas State after its A-plus game last week? Chris Kleiman even said it. We can't play any better. We can't possibly play any better than we did against Oklahoma State, 48-0. That's one of the all-time eggs laid by any college football team I've seen in the last 20 years. What Oklahoma State did last week. What happened, Tim? How many first downs did Oklahoma State have?
14.
And some of those were garbage time first downs, I think.
3 turnovers, only 217 total yards for the Pokes. So
they were almost as bad as the Las Vegas Raiders.
24-0 loss to
they did cross
to
midfield.
the Saints.
They did cross midfield before the final 2 minutes. Okay. I'm not sure if Adrian Martinez is going to be back to start this game, but if it's Will Howard, I would be okay with that if you're playing Kansas State. As far as Texas goes, I don't trust the Longhorns as even a small road favorites here. I was surprised at how bad Quinn Ewers looked in that loss at Oklahoma State a couple weeks ago. So this game's going to be a pass for me. And I think Kansas State, what's K-State's record right now? I think
6-2. And they what is it, 4-1 in conference because one of their losses is to Tulane.
I don't want to say anything I'm going to regret, but I need one more win from K-State to get over its season win total. It's a push for me right now.
I actually played Texas here.
Did you? Okay.
I think this may be, as you mentioned about Chris Kleiman, I think this is a buy low spot or sell high spot, I beg your pardon, on Kansas State. Texas coming off a bye. K-State just absolutely hammering Oklahoma State. They are at home, which is a tricky spot. I do normally like Chris Kleiman as a dog, but I'm going to take Texas here. I'm going to lay the under the field goal spot. It just feels like, a head-scratching line to some why Kansas State, fresh off of that win, being the higher-ranked team, would be an underdog to Texas. Look, Texas has the capabilities, as we have seen, to blow games ugly. We saw against Oklahoma State, they should have won that game. Should have beat Texas Tech without Quinn Ewers. They did not win either one of those games. I'm not a huge Sark guy in-game. I think he's a great play designer, but I am going to roll with the Texas Longhorns coming off a bye here against Kansas State. All right.
I wish you luck on that one. I don't trust Sark. I see a lot of things in him as a coach I don't like. I just don't trust. Off a bye, I don't have more confidence in him. Like, Sark's going to have a great game plan. He's going to show up, and the Longhorns going to play their A game. For some reason, just don't trust the guy.
That's I have
a lot of confidence.
I go back to his days at USC. I know he was dealing with some demons there, but I was not impressed with him at USC. But we'll see. I will take Texas here, laying the short number on the road, which is always a risky proposition. All right, Matt, let's get to it. Those spicy matchups. Everyone is angry, fired up, yelling, because TCU, undefeated, is ranked behind Alabama in the first college football playoff rankings.
Can I say something here real quick?
Please do.
I've got a friend who hasn't, I guess I call him a friend. I hadn't heard from him in like 2 months. And all of a sudden I get a text out of nowhere, the committee is screwing TCU. Are you serious? That's the first text you sent me in 2 months?
Hey, how are you? Good to hear from you.
He was looking for, I think, the first couple weeks of college football. He texted me looking for some plays, and I hadn't heard from him since. And then the text out of nowhere comes in, angry about TCU. I said, dude, it does not matter one bit. It doesn't matter, right? All this stuff's going to work itself out. That's a dog and pony show that ESPN produces to get a lot of people to watch it and talk about it. We know the committee is fixed anyway, but the first set of rankings do not matter. Maybe you use it as a handicapping factor, saying, "Hey, the TCU team's going to be ticked off. They've been disrespected."
You could go that way.
Okay.
I'm actually going the other way here. I think I took 9.5 with Texas Tech. You're starting to see the market move with TCU. I'll actually say this, and maybe it was silly of me when it was at 9.5. I bought it to 10 at -120. I know, it's a key number, but it's a shootout, so maybe it won't come into effect. But to your point about peace of mind, I'd have been so mad if it lands 48-38 TCU and I don't get the push. So I did earlier in the week play TCU. I know our colleague Adam Burke wrote it up for the website as well. I think this is kind of a tricky spot. Now, I said this last week for TCU, and obviously, for some reason, Max Dugan wanted to call an audible at the line of scrimmage and kick me in the nuts because that was fun. Did you have West Virginia too?
No, I was on a flight to San Diego when all that nonsense was happening. The shenanigans at the end of the Penn State game and the West Virginia game. I almost played West Virginia. I held off. I avoided that brutal beat.
I did.
I did play Penn State. I'm glad I wasn't watching it live because I would have been furious. I got off the plane. I saw the final score. I said, okay, cool, whatever. Penn State covered. Then I looked at the game cast, the box, whatever on my phone. I said, you've got to be bleeping kidding me. That's how it happened? Penn State led that game 21-16 with 9 minutes to go. You're catching 15.5.
Yeah, I had a buddy.
You had to have a backdoor score to cover.
I was wondering why I didn't get text from you. I had a buddy saying, they're not going to cover. Watch it, it's going to happen. And fortunately for the Penn State backers, right side the whole way, didn't get there. On Tuesday's podcast, Adam, who did lay it with TCU, he tried to defend it. Well, they were averaging 9 yards per carry or yard. I'm like, whatever. They called an audible on 4th and 1 when the guy jumps off sides to throw a corner route. Like, maybe karma's coming to get TCU. I don't know. But Texas Tech, they got, their butt whipped last week. Obviously, this is a road game, but it's kind of that sleepy start time, which it was last week, and I said the same thing. But I'm getting, Texas Tech heading into this game. They've been beat up pretty good last week against Baylor.
Yeah.
But I think Texas Tech is capable. They've got a whole bunch of different quarterbacks they got to try to figure out there. Their defense is actually not that bad. And maybe this is a little bit of a look-ahead spot. TCU next week, Matt, goes to Austin, night game against Texas. You win that game, boy, you're in great shape to go to the Big 12 championship game in Sonny Dykes' first year. And then you look at the last, handful of games, they should be in good shape here. So I like the Red Raiders to make it competitive. They have shown their ability to keep things close. They obviously beat Texas earlier this year. So I'm going to take the points here with Texas Tech against TCU.
Okay. This is going to be a pass for me. Nobody is going to talk about this being a look-ahead spot for Texas this week with TCU coming to town on deck, because I think when you come off a bye, you're never looking ahead 2 weeks, right? You've been looking at your next opponent. And K-State is obviously a formidable opponent, so I don't think this week's going to be a look-ahead spot for the Longhorns. Yeah, it's intriguing about that TCU-Texas game, too, is Gary Patterson, who he wanted nothing more in life than to beat Texas when he was a TCU coach. He is now on the Texas staff, and TCU's coming to town, and how big is that game going to be next week?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. All right, let's get to another game in that noon window. Texas Tech, TCU, noon on Fox, noon on FS1. Iowa at Purdue. The Hawkeyes are the most fascinating team, maybe not the most, but one of the most fascinating teams in all of the land, because they are dominant defensively, but one of the worst offenses we have ever seen. So talk to me about Iowa at Purdue, because I think you and I might be on the same side on this one.
Look at this, Tim. There's a picture of Gary Patterson in a Texas hat. That just doesn't look right.
It looks like it's photoshopped on him.
He's an assistant to the head coach at Texas, special assistant to Stark at Texas. All right, so Iowa's been a favorite against Purdue 12 of the last 13 meetings, and Purdue's beat the Hawkeyes 4 of the last 5. But the last 2 in West Lafayette decided by 2 points and 4 points. And I think what you're going to have here is just another tight game that goes to the wire, because this Iowa defense right now leads the nation in yards per play, 3.9 yards per play. And Purdue's going to, I think for the first time, run into a defense that's going to have a lot of trouble moving the ball against through the air. One thing I do like about the Boilermakers, they found this running back. I don't know if you've noticed, Devin Mockbee. He was a walk-on. He looks like Mike Allstott reincarnated, and he's really added a dimension to that offense, because Jeff Brom's offenses typically have pretty poor rushing stats. But this Mockbee kid has stepped up and really been a force. He's taken over that lead running back role, so I think that makes their offense more potent. But to me, it comes down to the Hawkeyes finally woke up on offense last week. I don't think it's necessarily that was a buy sign that they got 398 yards and 33 points against Northwestern. But you're taking a team here that's been, like I said, favored in 12 of the last 13 meetings, and all of a sudden is a 5-point dog. I got to take the points. And I think, like I said, the Hawkeyes defense is going to be a tough matchup for that Purdue offense. Tim, you watched the Iowa-Ohio State game. I think
score was misleading.
Yeah, I thought the Hawkeyes defense did a really good job of controlling that Ohio State offense in that game too. So I'm going to say Purdue wins this one by a field goal, or it's a field goal game either way. Give me a 5 with Iowa.
Well, you're on the right side, because right now as we sit here, the market is moving to Iowa, +3 or -3.5 now for Purdue. Still a 4 out there. But I know you gave this one out earlier this week. But, yeah, I took 4.5 earlier this week with the Hawkeyes, so I'm with you.
Is it really down to
yeah.
I even actually bet Iowa +5 last night at Red Rock Sportsbook in Vegas.
Yeah, it's down to 3.5 pretty much across the board where we sit, DraftKings, et cetera. So money coming in on the Hawkeyes. I don't know if it'll be 9-6 like Iowa, Illinois, like we got a couple weeks ago.
That's one of the worst games I've ever seen.
It cashed us a ticket, though, so we got home on that one. All right, a couple more quick hitters here in the spicy matchups. Kentucky and Missouri. Kentucky absolutely beat up last week by Tennessee. Really impressive performance, as we mentioned earlier in the pod, by Tennessee. I'm intrigued by Missouri here. They are starting to, it's about a pick in some spots. Earlier this week, I'm going to double check what number I got on Missouri. I took the money line at even money. Okay. So basically what it is right now. maybe not an official play, but I do like the Tigers here. They're really stout defensively. And a couple weeks ago, I thought that the performance that they had, Matt, against Georgia was fool's gold. Mm-hmm. Looking ahead, and maybe it was a little bit for Georgia. But I think week after week, we've kind of learned that Missouri's pretty darn good. We played Missouri. Did you play Missouri last week?
I did not, but
I had Missouri plus the 4 against South Carolina.
Smart play by you.
Dominated them, and I maybe not an official play, but I personally will play Missouri here. Coming off of a South Carolina game, but I don't know. I'm curious what Kentucky's mindset is after getting their butt kicked by Tennessee.
Got to be depressed. I think the Wildcats went to. They went to Knoxville thinking they had a great shot to pull off the upset, and I did too. I talked last week about Will Levis. Is he going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft? Chris Rodriguez, stud running back. Mark Stoops at defense. I thought Kentucky had all the elements it needs to pull off an upset like that. And at some point, can we stop touting Will Levis as a potential number 1 pick in the NFL draft? I know he was actually attracting money at some sports books to be the number 1 pick. You can't ignore the tape. You can't ignore the numbers. Tim, I was very disappointed in the way he played last week. And on the season, he's got 13 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So I don't know where the Wildcats' mindset's going to be after they got their heads caved in by the Volunteers last week. I would pass or play Missouri.
All right, going back to
I'm going to pass.
Going back to the Big 12, this is a play that I got earlier in the week at plus 2.5. Thought I'd get the 3. Actually, if you were really aggressive, you could have got a 3.5, and that's Kansas hosting Oklahoma State. Not that long ago, Matt, Kansas was America's team.
That's right.
Everybody loved Kansas. How could you go against Kansas when I bet against them? 3 consecutive weeks on this podcast and on VSiN.com. And now nobody wants to talk about Kansas. Out of sight, out of mind. The last time we saw them, they lost to Baylor pretty comfortably. I believe officially, per the closing line, their only non-cover of the season. And then you've got Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, as we talked about earlier, got absolutely shellacked by Kansas State. I would have preferred them not to get their ass kicked by Kansas State for this spot. But Oklahoma State, Matt, talk about difference in rest. Oklahoma State had an early bye after non-conference, and they have now played 5 consecutive Big 12 games, Matt. This is their stretch. Baylor on the road, Texas Tech at TCU, Texas at Kansas State, and now they're at Kansas. Kansas, on the other hand, is coming off a bye. There are reports that Jalen Daniels has been practicing this week, could be back. I still don't mind it if Jason Bean is there. And the bigger news is that Spencer Sanders, according to reports, is not practicing this week. And if he doesn't go, and the market kind of is trying to tell you something, Gunnar Gundy, redshirt freshman, son of Mike Gundy, a no-star recruit, will start at quarterback for the Pokes this week.
I want to see that.
And the last thing I'll say about this, Matt, and I look at teams with 5 wins, and I say, what game are they going to put it all in to try to get to that 6th win? And look, bigger name teams, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, etc., they don't care about their 6th win. They've got bigger aspirations. Kansas has not been to a bowl game since 2008.
Right.
And they are 1 win away. And if they lose this game, they've got a road game at Texas Tech. They've got a home game against Texas. They could be
finish at K-State.
They could go 5-7.
Sure.
I think this is the game off the bye. You're going to get everything from Kansas. I imagine you're going to get a good crowd there. Give me Kansas. Anything? I'll take it at a pick right now. I took 2.5, but I think they win this game. I think it's a vital game for them. And if Gunnar Gundy is the starting quarterback, I'll take my chances, even though Kansas's defense leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, Kansas, like you said, dropped 3 in a row. Needs 1 more win to be bowl eligible. I think the Jayhawks get it here. I hope
so.
It looks like the Cowboys are a mess.
Whole lot of injuries, in addition to Spencer Sanders. Offensive line,
banged up
defensive
team,
line,
got beat 48-0.
By the way, Oklahoma State.
It looks like the coach's kid, who you said is a zero-star recruit.
Zero-star recruit.
Might be the starting quarterback.
Oklahoma State, you think about the addition that Ohio State got with Jim Knowles. Oklahoma State, Matt, is the worst defense in the Big 12, statistically speaking. Now, Kansas is the second worst, so it's not like they're much better, but they're giving up 455 yards per game. So I will take Kansas, motivated spot against the Pokes here. A couple other games, curious your thoughts, if anything. We do have a ranked matchup in the ACC. NC State, obviously no Devin Leary. It's been a disappointing year for them, and they're playing Wake Forest, who I don't know if you caught that third quarter against Louisville.
35-0?
I had Louisville, and
Nice.
I was very happy about that. 6 turnovers in the third quarter alone, Matt.
That's unbelievable.
8 in totality for Wake Forest.
Yeah.
They're laying 4 on the road against NC State, and then your classic rivalry, FSU Miami, has a 7.5-point spread in favor of the road team. FSU laying 7.5 against Miami. Any thoughts on either one of these games?
First, I can't play Wake after that 8 turnover debacle last week. Man, that was unbelievable to see with that third quarter.
And Sam Hartman's a really good quarterback.
Yeah, that's one of the things that leave you scratching your head. Also, you were scratching your head trying to figure out how the hell did Miami and Virginia play 4 overtimes and the game's 14-12. I think
Miami didn't score a touchdown.
I think last year, and this is really going to test my memory, I think Illinois beat Penn State in 8 or 9 overtimes,
20-18?
20-18.
Yeah.
It's just it's comical how stuff like that could happen. How bad is Mario Cristobal?
Not great. But
Man.
he can recruit. I keep
hearing that. He can recruit, but he doesn't win.
Anyone in Eugene crying over his departure right now?
They're happy he's gone. And you can see the difference in this Ducks team without him. I want to play Florida State here, Tim, but the number's too much, simply put. I'm not going to waste a lot of time talking about it. I can't lay 7.5. I was hoping to lay a cheaper number.
All right, let's bring back a segment we haven't done in a couple weeks. Let's get to a little big boys with big spreads. I guess Utah would be a big boy. I don't know. They're top 15 in the country. Went to the Rose Bowl last year. They are at home. A night game. I guess it's a mid-afternoon game. 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. No one will watch it because it's on the Pac-12 network. Arizona visiting Utah, and the Wildcats, a team that you have played on a bunch this year, Matt.
Too much.
Is catching 17.5 against the Utes.
Even ended up taking the points with Arizona against USC last week, and that was one of the Wildcats' better efforts, I thought, to hang in that game with the Trojans.
Had 500-plus yards of offense.
And they're going to give up 500 on defense, too. That's one of the problems with Arizona, but maybe catch Utah in a little bit of a sleepy spot here, Tim, because Cameron Rising did not play in the previous game. He is going to come back. It looks like Rising's going to start for the Utes, a quarterback in this one. But he's got a sleeve on his left knee, and a big part of his game is running the ball. And I don't think you're going to see Rising running the ball much in this game with his knee issue. Also, the Utes know they can win this game. They got bigger fish to fry down the road. You can win this game, move on. You don't have to beat Arizona by 30 points here. And another concern, I think, with Utah is going to be their tight ends out now. Mm-hmm. They're down to, I think,
Kincaid.
the third string tight end. A little bit beat up on offense. They were kind of fortunate to escape on the road last week. And this is a much bigger game for Arizona. I think the Wildcats are going to come in here fired up. I think the Utes are going to be maybe looking past this team a little bit, kind of a sleepy spot for the home favorite. I took 18 with Arizona.
Yeah, last week, one of those maybe that's why TCU covered against West Virginia, because I had Washington State on Friday night, and I had the plus 7.5, and I get the alert, Cam Rising's not playing. I'm like, wow, I never get lucky with injury news like that. So we were fortunate with that. Brant Keithy has been I believe that's the tight end that's been out for a while. Dalton Kincaid is sensational. Is Kincaid hurt too?
I think he's hurt too.
Oh,
so
boy.
I think Utah's down to their third tight end now.
All right. Well, while you look that up, can I interest you in some Rutgers? Huh?
Sure.
Plus 26.5 at home. Michigan coming off
last week.
Coming off a rivalry game No, not last week. Maybe that's why it makes it that much hold on to your this is hold on to your butt special. Shutout last week against Minnesota, and now you're playing Michigan. You're catching 26.5 at home. Now, I want to bring something up. Rutgers beat Indiana 24-17 as a 3-point favorite. Indiana was a 23-point underdog at home against Michigan. You and I both had the Hoosiers, and never in doubt, 31-10, even though I think it was 10-10 there. So I'm just playing the numbers here. I think it's a little bit of a sleepy spot for Michigan coming off of, back-to-back games against Penn State, rival Michigan State. I don't know, maybe they're juiced up after, the melee that happened to one of their teammates there and then the locker room there. But Schiano, night game, 26.5. I'm going to take the points with the Scarlet Knights here and, wish for the best.
I'm going to pass on this one, but I think in terms of a spot play, I agree with what you're looking at here with the Rutgers.
All right, let's run through a couple other big games.
By the way, just to clear that up, Dalton Kincaid did leave the game last week, late in the game for Utah, the tight end, and did not return. His status is day-to-day, but it looks like he's doubtful to play this week.
That would be a big loss for this game. They're gearing up for everything on November 19th when they take on Oregon for a chance to go to the Pac-12 championship. Ohio State, I'm just going to run through these. If you have anything, we'll hit on at the end. Ohio State laying 38 against Northwestern on the road. Could be windy there in Chicago on Saturday. Oregon taking on the mighty Mike Pritchards of Colorado. They are a 31-point road favorite. Penn State on the road at Indiana. A lot of road chalk here. 14 points are the Nittany Lions laying there against Indiana. Illinois, never thought I'd see the day for this, Matt. Illinois is laying 17 at home against Michigan State. And then USC, to wrap up, big boys with big spreads here. USC is laying 22 against Cal.
All right, I'll go through those quickly. I was talking with Doug Kazarian, our buddy from ESPN last night. The betting bully sounds like he's going to lay the points with the Buckeyes against the Purple Cats. And that one, I think, Tim, it was discouraging to watch Northwestern get beat down so badly by Iowa last week, and that's definitely caused this number to go up a little bit. Not too many people are going to run to the window to bet Northwestern after you get blown out by Iowa. As far as the Oregon-Colorado game, that's a pass. Penn State-Indiana, I would like to play the home dog, but the Hoosiers just lost Cam Camper, maybe their best wide receiver. But I think that spot is a good one for the Hoosiers.
Off the Ohio State game.
Yep. I'm considering playing the Hoosiers on the points in that one. And, with Michigan State's suspensions and everything that's happened since the Michigan game last week, how many points do you think it's caused? What's that number without Michigan State's disciplinary issues and all the players who are missing? Would the number be 11 and a half?
Yeah.
Would it be 13?
I mean, you've seen it rise all week. It opened 10 at Circa and then jumped. So it's moved a touchdown. So, yeah, you're probably in that ballpark.
Still seems like too big of a number, but the Spartans, tough team to get behind now. And what was the last one?
And Cal USC, north of 3 touchdowns.
Nah, I'm going to pass because last week you and I talked about Cal catching 17 against Oregon. And
lost by 18.
Lost by 18, and Jack Plummer just doesn't have it. I don't think Cal's good enough at the quarterback position to bet.
All right, let's wrap up the podcast with some more plays via Off the Radar. All right, a game that you have, let's go to Stark Vegas. Cadillac Williams comes riding into town, takes over for Brian Harsin. The following the freshly coaching fired teams. Does that make sense? Teams that have coaches who just got fired has actually been a pretty profitable experience so far this year outside of Nebraska in their first game with Mickey Joseph there against Oklahoma. So Auburn is in Stark Vegas. New coach, it is Cadillac Williams, and the number is 13 in favor of Mississippi State here. Yeah, in fact, I took 14 with Auburn this week. Robbie Ashford, the freshman quarterback, is a kid I like. I think he's got a bright future. 285 passing yards, 87 rushing yards last week. Tank Bigsby, one of the top running backs in the SEC, and I think this team
is really going to be energized by Cadillac Williams taking over, and this whole Brian Harsin debacle being in the past. It's in the rearview mirror, and I think it's kind of like a monkey off the back of the Auburn team, because from the day Brian Harsin was hired, didn't it seem like a bad fit?
Made no sense.
I could not figure it out. I said, you got to be kidding me. That's a terrible hire. The whole thing with Brian Harsin's been a debacle, and I think Auburn moving on is the best thing that could happen to this team this week and to this program going forward. And I kind of like the Auburn side here catching 2 touchdowns. Also, on the other side, I think Mississippi State's going the wrong direction. This is a team that's lost 2 in a row and scored a total of only 23 points in the last 2 games, Tim, against Kentucky and Alabama. So it's not like Mike Leach's team is in any sort of offensive rhythm right now. So I think it's probably a good time to play Auburn.
All right, I'm gonna play a game here. The line seems suspiciously short. 25th ranked UCF at Memphis at the Liberty Bowl, 3:30 Eastern kickoff, ESPN2. This is what they would call a sandwich spot. UCF just beat Cincinnati. Next week, they go to Tulane for an opportunity really to play for a New Year's Six Bowl. And now this week, UCF has to go to Central Florida. Central Florida has not really, or excuse me, Memphis has to go to Memphis. Memphis has not been very good this year. But they always seem, Matt, in these spots to play better than anticipated. I was talking to some folks in Memphis. They're curious about their head coach, and is the team still buying in? Look, they've lost 3 straight. They got beat up pretty good by Tulane. I believe that was 2 weeks ago. So they're coming off a bye. But that game against Tulane, they were down, I think, 28-0. Mm-hmm. They came back and they had a chance to cover. So. They got a pretty good quarterback, Seth Hennigan. He can throw it around. John Reese Plumlee is day-to-day. I believe he left last week with a concussion. Mikey Keene's okay, the backup there for UCF. But I think this is a tricky spot for the Golden Knights. I think this is a letdown spot. And I'm going to take 3.5 with Memphis here on the at home against UCF.
I agree with you. I think Memphis, I don't have this as a play right now, but I've been considering Memphis this week. By the way, do you think Auburn fans should have appreciated Gus Malzahn more? The success he had against Nick Saban, the record he had at Auburn, I always felt like he was underappreciated.
There was someone, maybe it was Reddit College Football, or someone tweeted out, Auburn should really look at an up-and-coming Group of 5 head coach.
This UCF coach.
Maybe this UCF coach will work out well.
A guy who's got a good record against Nick Saban.
Well, we've talked about all the big games of the weekend, the great atmospheres, whether it be in Athens, in Death Valley, South Bend. I think the atmosphere in Palo Alto is going to be top-notch. 12:30 local kickoff, Pac-12 network. About as many people will be watching this on television as they are in the stands. Washington State at Stanford. What do you got here for us? Stanford right now, looking at the market as we record, is catching 5 at the South Point, 4.5 everywhere else.
Yeah, Stanford Steve's going to be laughing if he hears this, because I think he hates this Cardinal team.
Except for they beat Notre Dame, of course.
I think he has for the last couple of years. Stanford actually beat Notre Dame and Arizona State back-to-back by scoring 16 and 15 points.
Didn't kick a touchdown or field goal, or didn't score a touchdown against Arizona State.
It's interesting when you watch Stanford. David Shaw lacks so much imagination on the offensive end in terms of his play calling. Last week, Stanford had a 1st and goal at the 6-yard line. And, Tim, they lined up in a tight formation and ran the ball up the middle on 1st down for 1 yard. On 2nd down, they lined up in a tight formation and ran the ball up the middle for no gain. What the hell are you doing? Seriously. David Shaw has no clue. I can't stand the guy's play calling. But he's got a pretty good quarterback here in Tanner McKee, and the Stanford defense played a lot better, especially against the pass. Now, last week, UCLA ran for 324 yards and 7.2 per carry. But Washington State's not going to do that. The Cougars can't run the ball. Cameron Ward is everything to that offense right now. He passed for 222 yards and ran for 28 last week. The rest of the team combined for 14 yards rushing. It's all Cam Ward. They can't run the ball Washington State's lost 3 in a row and scored a total of 41 points in those games. I think the Cardinals are going to be live here. I played Stanford +5, and I'll probably at some point be very frustrated with David Shaw while I'm watching this game, too.
All right. I'll give you one more, and then I have a question for Matt on one other game. I'm taking the points with James Madison, plus the 7.5. They're on the road at Louisville. You know me. I love letdown spots. Louisville last week beat top 10 Wake Forest. We mentioned that already. 8 turnovers forced. How about this? Louisville has forced 24 turnovers this year.
That's impressive.
Is that impressive? Is that lucky? Is that both?
8 of those last week.
Yeah, 8 of those last week. 6 of those, 1/4 of their turnovers came in 13 in a 15-minute quarter.
Yeah, that's great.
Louisville early on in the year, Matt, started 0-3 in the ACC, ready to fire Scott Satterfield,
Sure.
and here they are. They're 5-3. They've won 3 in a row. On deck for Louisville is Clemson. They just beat a top 10 team, and now you've got to face a team from the Sun Belt in James Madison. The biggest key for me in this game is Todd Centeio, the James Madison quarterback, playing? From all accounts, it looks like he's been practicing this week. He's dealing with an oblique injury that kept him out of the Marshall game. In that Marshall game, James Madison's defense or offense was completely worthless. 247 yards. How about this, Matt? 0 for 17 on third downs. How do you do that?
I don't know.
0 for 17 on third downs. Billy Atkins, I'm sure he's a great young man. I don't know if he's a very good quarterback. We need Todd Centeio, who's top 10 in the country in passing efficiency. James Madison, I think we've mentioned on this podcast before, for some reason, Matt, is not allowed to go to a bowl game this year. Yeah. So I think this is their bowl game. They get to go on the road to a Power 5 team in Louisville. I think they'll be up for the task. James Madison coming off a bye, Louisville coming off a top 10 win. I'm going to take the 7.5 with James Madison here against Louisville on Saturday night.
Yeah. So very thorough analysis on your part. Remember a couple weeks ago we were talking about the Packers being 0 for 6 on third down against Washington? Yeah. 0 for 6. This team was 0 for 17.
Final one for you, Matt, that I was curious about the dog, and you know this team pretty well.
Uh-huh.
UNLV, coming off a bye at San Diego State. Did you watch the San Diego State-Fresno State game last week?
Oh, boy, that's tough. If you had the Aztecs on the money line.
Oh, gut-wrenching. 2 touchdowns in 13 seconds.
Are you kidding me?
2 touchdowns in 13 seconds.
The thing about that, too, is we had good information that Jake Haener was coming back to play in that game. But it didn't matter because if you laid the points for Fresno, that was the wrong side.
Total wrong side.
The difference Jake Haener made in that game was with the total. Mm-hmm. Because I think Friday morning the total was 42, and that game flew over the total, obviously.
I tell you what, next Friday night, Jake Haener comes to Vegas. I'm going to go to that game.
Are you?
I want to see Jake Haener. Okay. I like him. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks. I love.
By the way, you're going to have a pretty good quarterback matchup, assuming Doug Brumfield stays healthy, because he's going to be back for the Rebels. And this team, the wheels fell off when Doug Brumfield went to the sideline with an injury. Now that he's back, I think you're going to see a different UNLV team. But I wanted to get 7 here, Tim. I don't think 7's out there anymore, right? It's 6.5 across the board.
And that's what I was going to ask. I want 7 too. I'll probably play this game. I'll buy the half point. UNLV still has 2 very winnable games to get to 6 wins. Hawaii on the road, and then Nevada, I should say, too. But do you think they're live here against San Diego State?
I think they're live. I think the Aztecs are probably going to find a way to win the game. You know, it's one of those games where San Diego State's a little bit better defensively, and I think probably wins this game by a field goal. But the reason you've seen this number come down in the market is I do think there's a little point spread value with the Rebels.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up, Matt, with our best bet recap. All right, Matt, I don't know if we're doing first class or coach, we're doing this week.
It's all the same.
Fire away, sir.
I don't have any plays I love this week, but I'm going to go with Tennessee plus 8.5. Like I said, I'm buying insurance with Georgia moneyline parlays. I'm going with Auburn. I took 14 with Auburn. Is 14 still available anywhere?
I think 13 was the best I saw.
Okay.
Auburn is 13.
Stanford plus 5, Arizona plus 18. Iowa, I took 5. I'm playing Clemson. Give me Clemson money line 10 because I just don't want to lay more than 3. And I'm on a split a unit here on LSU plus the points, trying to get 14. If it doesn't pop up, you can put me down for 13.5 and over the total of 58.
All right.
So that's a half unit on each of those.
Half unit on each of those. All right. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total
Half
units.
as many plays as last week.
I know. 8 and 6 last week.
I actually ended up betting, I think, 18 games last week.
Wow.
Yeah. Not going to be that deep a card this week.
I'm going to tell you, I played Iowa as well, so an agreement on that one. Give me Memphis plus the 3.5 against UCF. Give me Texas Tech. I played 10. I bought it up to 10, but on this show right now it's only at 9. I'll still take Texas Tech. I think you might see a little liveliness there from Texas Tech, so officially plus 9. Texas minus 2.5. Maybe a sell high spot on Kansas State. Kansas, money line that. If you can get an even money line, go for it. James Madison plus 7.5, and I'll take the under 44.5 in Notre Dame Clemson. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plays for me. I do like Missouri. Probably will play it personally, but not going to be an official play here on the podcast. All right, Mr. Youmans, that's going to do it. You are that many more days closer to your trip to Maui. At Matt Youmans, 247 on Twitter.
College hoop season right around the corner,
Starts
Tim.
on Monday.
We have the VSiN college basketball betting guide coming out, and I think I've worked about 50 hours on that this week. So,
yeah, I got to finish up the Big East. I got to do that. So I got to make the bosses happy. Got to get on that. Once again, rate, review, subscribe if you're still listening. Hopefully you still are. Let's get some winners, and we'll talk to you next week right here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.